What's going on, everyone? Jeremy here from The Quartering, and I hope you're having a wonderful day. I think that this probably is one of the more rage-inducing articles written by what is probably one of the worst humans on the planet, and I figured, why not ruin your day with it? Look, I think it's fair to question certain things, especially when it comes to your military, at least here in the United States, but overwhelmingly, I support my troops. The men and women of the service, I support them essentially without question, because regardless of how they got there, they're there defending this country. The decisions of their superiors aren't something that I always agree with, and I'm sure that many servicemen and women don't always agree with them either. But overall, I have great respect for the men and women in the service at all branches and all levels, and will defend them from defamatory articles like this and opinions of losers who've never really faced any real adversity in their entire life. I think I've been relatively on record that the military does have some very questionable recruitment strategies and that I think are worth exploring. But outside of that, that's not really what this moron's article is about. You can see this article here, the white men who wanted to be victims, from Vietnam to the present, how aggrieved men cast themselves as discriminated against minority. Essentially, this is a woke article, an anti-white male article, but specifically targeting our veterans. Our veterans, often left behind. They're one of, if not the largest group of the homeless in this country, and they need more support than ever. I'm actually looking at doing some work with Stack Up, which helps veterans, maybe in June, raising some money for that. But one of the particularly inflammatory lines from this article is simply, American soldiers served overseas, returning Vietnam vets mimicked the rhetoric and strategies of the era's homegrown protest movements while developing a painful narrative of abandonment and trauma to convey their own sense of disaffection. Now, obviously, I'm not old enough to have served during Vietnam, but the idea that these men and women, mostly men at that time, were revered when they came back to this country is ridiculous, non-factual, and insulting to the very core. These are people that did not, by and large, sign up to go to the jungle over there and fight for a war that nobody really understood at the time. They were drafted against their will and came back. And you can see this comment from Optimus, who's a great YouTuber too, saying, one of my grandfathers suffered from Agent Orange exposure his whole life before dying from cancer, likely caused by what he saw in Vietnam. My other grandfather shows clear signs of PTSD from his service. They were spit on and egged returning home. Disrespectfully. Twitter's been unfollowing me from people. Anyway. Let me know when your granddad is in near tears explaining to you that when he was your age, he was sitting in a jungle piling sandbags against the sides of a roof of his barracks because the Viet Cong were coming from the trees and RPGing them 24/7. And you could see here, what's even more bizarre is they're pretending as if there were zero POC veterans or thousands upon thousands of veterans who served in this war specifically that were people of color. And you could see, bro, these anti-white narratives are getting out of hand. My uncle was wounded in Vietnam and has been going to a veteran support group for years. What does this have to do with white people? And if you look at some other stats, I think Optimus posts too. Also, I wanted to state that, I'm sorry, next time where is this? She gives us a good take. Also, I want to take the time to say that it's an absolute disgrace that the U.S. spent nearly $722 billion last year on military, and yet vets from Vietnam are still resorting to ending things because they couldn't be helped to a normal life post-war. Chris Reagan chiming in, do people actually not get that the military goes to schools and recruits vulnerable kids to be tools of the state and with false promises and then basically abandons them when they come home? This is anti-veteran trash. It's just simping for the military masquerading as woke. Yeah, I mean, look, I'm not exactly sure what they thought they were going to accomplish with this article. Chris Lehman. Let's take a look into who this coward is real quick. Okay. I got a good idea who you are. The title of Joseph Darda's new book, How White Men Won the Culture Battles. Many land awkwardly for weary followers of the recursive debates over cancel culture, wokeness, and the like. The loudest and most visible partisans in this battle are the aggrieved white men, insisting they are scapegoats in unhinged identity-driven witch hunts and eagerly putting themselves forward as martyrs in ugly confrontations over free speech. You get that article is just clearly trying to gaslight, right? The idea that, a white man is discriminated against as much as, let's say, a black man in maybe everyday life. Okay, we can have that conversation. But when we're talking about who you're allowed to discriminate openly in the press, it's obviously white men. You couldn't write this article about black men and women. You just couldn't. We talked about this yesterday. Let's see. I bet you, let's see, 300,000 African Americans served in Vietnam. 300,000. How's it then that this demographic emerged as the victors of the modern American culture wars and managed to leverage that success into ongoing, ever-renewable plaints of grievance? It doesn't feel like we're winning, son. It feels like the traditional male character is generally mocked in modern media. The Homer Simpson, Peter Griffin of America. And most modern cinema, men are constantly playing second fiddle to women. I just watched actually a pretty good movie called The Clove Hitch, something like that. It was actually pretty good. But again, the boy, as constantly 3 steps behind the girl who's, leading the way and just far smarter and more intelligent. That's a common trope in modern cinema. You see here, the answer, Darda argues in his original and persuasive revisionist study, lies in the overlap between post-1960s culture, the culture battle, and the legacy of actual battles. The American debacle in Vietnam, the United States withdrew in defeat in 1975, a fraught moment as well for the American political economy. Yeah, I would argue, yeah. You think here that you see other returning veterans. No, I'm not going to give you ads. Other returning veterans, meanwhile, were coping with the challenges of reintegrating into American society that seemed ashamed of the failed Southeast Asian War and indifferent to hostile to the plight of the veterans. The mounting sense of an enemy in the white veterans community became focused on the notion of post-traumatic stress, a new psychological diagnosis that took root after a nurse in Boston hospital treated a veteran who'd taken part in the infamous terrible incident. I don't understand what you think, what you think that this article is going to do. The idea that they weren't openly discriminated against in society. Veterans are still discriminated against in our society, by people who in no short order have ever done anything for this country, who have ever volunteered probably for anything that didn't personally benefit them in this country. They actively benefit from their sacrifice. I mean, you have stuff like the emerging new politics of white blamelessness came to a head in 1978. U.S. Supreme Court, Regents University, California versus Bake. I'm guessing, I'm not sure. He alleged that he was a victim of racial discrimination. I'm not using your fake terminology, reverse. Racism is just racism. After University of California twice rejected his medical school application in favor of non-white candidates selected under a quota system. Well, that is, right? I would argue that is. The court ruled in his favor. See? And in place of the putative discriminatory nature of admission quotas, the majority endorsed the far more amorphous to subject metric of, quote, diversity to justify minority outreach efforts in college admissions programs, thereby vastly complicating measurable progress in racial representation while helping to launch a top-down human resource land rush in diversity training and institutional image management. So essentially, what this person is lamenting is that, you know, they can't allow admission into college based on the color of your skin. Shocking. I don't know who this Chris Lehman loser is, but yeah, maybe don't be such a ghoul. You could see this is grotesque, very ignorant, should be ashamed of what you produced. Oh, here, let's see. I've probably already pre-blocked. Okay, so you're essentially nobody. My latest review from New Republic on veteran identity battles. Good stuff. Do you think a new analysis builds on rather than replaces the idea of cultural shift? He takes his PTSD. His take is that PTSD is largely made up. Bold. Poor take, disrespectful to people who didn't want any part of the draft, went over and died at a young age, or came back largely to unsympathetic audience that had little to no rehab centers for PTSD, akin to victim blaming. I mean, this is the worst take. You know, I mean, this is like, your opinions are garbage. Now do feminists. This is just infuriating. This person is a coward, and this is douchebaggery at the highest level. Hope you enjoyed this video. We'll talk to you again real soon.